assessment is that the federal legislation will pass. Certainly it will pass eventually, and I suspect it may well pass before the end of the year. The Western Australian Act will also pass and will be the law of Western Australia for the time being. But I think that that will be declared invalid when it's challenged in the High Court on several grounds. That native title will be recognised in some parts of Australia where it's not now. There will be some people who will become landowners who aren't now. It will be a massive transfer of property. Those people who say, oh, this is not much. It will be a massive transfer of property ownership, or an acceptance of ownership, from what the Western Australians say is vacant Crown land to Aboriginal native title, a very large area of land indeed. It will be a significant land transfer in that sense by world standards. Don't underestimate it. And as you should appreciate from the anger of the mining industry, it is some of the most, as they say, prospective territory in the world. So it isn't a small matter at all, and hence the whole concern in the Western Australian community. Where native title, where people don't gain that sort of title over the land, I think from now on there will be a growing appreciation that even where people cannot establish native title, that they continue to have an interest in the land, a legitimate interest in the land, and the Aboriginal interest will increase, Aborigines themselves will increasingly become involved in the management of the land, particularly in relation to land, environmental management and things like this, because they will be seen to have a legitimate interest even when they may not be able to establish full native title. So I think in so many ways, and for all of the reasons I've suggested, that the Mabo judgment was a watershed. I don't think there can be any crossing backwards over that watershed back into the territory of Terra Nullius. However, of course, this will be fought out in the political arena. At the moment, there's no doubt that conservative Australians have it in mind to try and do just that, to return Australia to the situation as it was before Mabo. The Liberals are making noises about repealing legislation when they come to power. They may or may not come to power, that is, and they may or may not repeal. But perhaps more worrying is the demands by some Conservatives, and given support by people who should know better, that there should be a referendum on the issue. And this, of course, has some significant support within the community. Now, whatever on earth a referendum would do is hard to say. Whatever the vote would be on, presumably those who propose the idea hope that they can bring the electorate, the whole Australian electorate, in on the side against the High Court, and to say, we don't want native title in Australia, and then giving legitimacy to government to do as Richard Court has done. Now, whether that is what they really suppose, I'm not sure, but just pause for a moment to consider what that would mean. It would certainly mean that the dispossession would be completed. There would be a massive land grab. It would be a continuation of some of the most discreditable aspects of Australian history. But what is more, it would use a referendum, a plebiscite, and then following legislation to wipe out the property rights of one group. It's an extraordinary proposition to come from people who claim to have respect for property rights. They would wipe out, they would plan to wipe out property rights. And that is the thing which they can't yet digest, that Aboriginal people can be property owners in their own right, and not because it's been given to them by well-meaning and guilt-ridden white people. They are property owners because they always have been. That, my friends, is the hardest thing for white Australians to come to terms with, because property brings respect and property brings all sorts of other things with it. The whole of Australian history was premised on people who came from England and wanted to get the respect that property gave you. And here, property is now seen as inhering in Indigenous people with native title. So if that was done, if that is seriously being proposed, it seems to me that the damage within Australia would be incalculable. There not only would be no chance of reconciliation, it would be almost a declaration of war, it seems to me. But what is more, Australia's international standing would simply disappear. Just imagine it. Any prospect of Australia joining the non-European world and being part of the Asian-Pacific world would disappear completely and totally. Any chance, for instance, of holding international gatherings like the Olympic Games would disappear. Australia would become a pariah. It would simply become a nation which no one would really want to deal with, because this would be an infamous act. And it seems to me extraordinary that there are leaders in the society that are still toying with this extreme idea. Well, I've dealt with a lot of things. I've dealt with sovereignty, and I dealt with property and land use and the politics of it and compensation. It is a very, very complex area. There are many, many other things that I could have dealt with had I the time and you the patience. But I hope that I have given some idea of what native title is and what the Mabo decision and the legislation will do for Australia. As I say, the High Court was right in law, and I think it has provided Australia with an opportunity that couldn't have come from the political arena, I don't think. The High Court has really given Australia the opportunity which could not have been given to us by the politicians. And it is up to all of us to make sure that we follow up the increasingly important ramifications of that judgment. We have crossed the watershed, and we have to make sure we keep going in that direction.